Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Teen Wolf, as well as the finale, series finale of Twin Peaks and/or Twin Peaks: The Return, whichever one you want to call it. The final episodes, Twin Peaks, ever. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, amazing intro, I know. You can always look in the description down below, and I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Teen Wolf, you could skip to what I had to say about this, the finale of Twin Peaks. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Teen Wolf. So things continue to get worse and worse in Beacon Hills, about this whole hunting down the supernatural, because you had this whole story at the beginning where you had this boy Edgar, who's obviously a supernatural, because everyone in school's got bloody hands. I was like, what the hell is that about? I was like, oh, were they out on a hunt or something like that? And I see everyone else, I'm like, all right, cutting themselves to see who's supernatural, which begs the question, because not every supernatural heals, do they? Do banshees heal super fast? I don't know if I ever noticed Lydia healing faster than anyone else, but typically the other supernatural, sure, but it's just kind of interesting. But I guess at the same time, that's what it's like, oh, well, we're trying to check and see how fast you heal. So, granted, everyone heals, but I guess that was meant to be like, oh, if you heal super fast or not. Well, it's actually kind of interesting too, is when you see that circumstance. Not only do you see everyone around hands cut and everything, but even the school has a different feel to it. It just feels kind of almost empty and soulless. There's even a point when Edgar, the boy at the beginning, was in the library and they're about to check him and everything, and you have certain students get up where obviously they didn't have cut hands, so it's like, okay, you're supernaturals, but even then you have this almost nervous look about everyone else, everyone's kind of freaked out about what's about to go down, but at the same time, I think it's more so everybody knows what's going on, but they're not really saying it out loud, and they're just like, okay, whatever that is, it's their own business, it's none of mine. So that fear kicking in and everything, and making everyone just like, no, this is almost like this is the right thing by being quiet and everything, not doing anything. I'm human. The fact is that they're getting on this dude, he's not human. This is all right. This is all fair. I think that's people's rationale for this whole situation. Like I said, we only saw this particular happen to Edgar, but this is outing all the supernaturals that are at Beacon Hill, which is something, Lydia kind of wanted to point out to her mom, which I'm curious to see what her mom has to say about all this. We haven't seen her really participate in the story in the sense of because Lydia was like, oh yeah, here's the name of all the supernaturals, but Natalie was kind of like, no, we don't need all that. You focus on college and everything. It's she kind of has to now worry about these particular circumstances. Knowing who's a supernatural and not probably would have helped them a lot going forward, so... But, things have played out the way they've gotten to at this point in time. So, nevertheless, it's actually kind of sad because the shapeshifter thing inside that student ended up... Which also, he's going back to his body. He's not just that fleshy thing anymore. Granted, I guess, that fleshy bit... It goes back to, what was what. I guess that was his original body. The fleshy bit was the boy's body before the shapeshifter, I guess, basically... ripped his skin off and put it on his own body, and he kind of injected his own fear powers into it. But once Parrish destroyed it last episode, I guess he had to go back to his original body. What is technically his original body? I think it's probably the thing. The shapeshifter keeps the same body. What it probably does is rip people's skin off. So that's my explanation for it. But it got to Edgar because it's looking for its other half. We found out about it last episodes. The fact is, because he was like, oh, you're a coyote, I want to say. So it seems like in his head, it has the idea that if it's going to pick a host, it's going to pick something supernatural to hide in, which is kind of interesting considering the fact is that it chose, this half chose a non-supernatural, which makes me think it's going to be a non-supernatural as well. My brain immediately is thinking it's Nolan. Nolan probably just doesn't know because when you actually look at it, Nolan didn't ever get cut because he's the first one that the thing went to, to draw him in about Nolan's paranoia about the supernatural and everything already, and all the things that's going down in Beacon Hills. I guess for it can't tell until it really digs its fangs into you. I mean, it literally, at the very least, its spiders into your skin to really determine what's you, whether there's the other half of it or not. But I'm thinking it's Nolan and it's buried deep down. And maybe that could arguably be why it is so fond of Nolan. I mean, because out of anyone, Nolan's the most afraid, the most fear it can feed off is from Nolan, as well as, Nolan can inspire that fear in others and kind of perpetuate it in others too. I mean, because it might be a similar situation, like, no shape or form did I ever think it was Mason who was holding the beast inside of him. So it's kind of like some similar circumstances. Like, I feel like because he's already so far in the spotlight, you wouldn't think it's him. He's the only person that we really kind of, like, in the background of things, kind of gotten to see at the forefront. So that's at least where my mindset is. And it'll probably turn out not to be the case, but my mind is immediately on him. He's kind of top suspect for that. But what's kind of interesting is, like, when he saw those spiders and things coming out of Edgar, I don't know whether it's just the fact is that he saw Edgar in pain, but you almost see a smirk across his face, like, yeah, that's what you get, you dirty supernatural, or something like that. But then the spiders came out, and then Monroe was like, comes in, she's telling him and Gabe is like, yo, take care of that. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, finish it off. And that's the thing too. Wasn't even referring to Edgar as in him. It was like, finish it off. It's like, shows you where Moreau stands on this whole thing. Like, if you're supernatural, you're not human. You're filthy. You're something else, So it's just sad to see see that side of her, even though she's a counselor and everything. To see her have that side of her, I guess that's her whole position as a counselor. Supposed to be ironic, I would assume. Not less that the whole purpose was to get close to students so she'd know who were supernatural and who weren't. So, I mean, it's crazy that she's going as far as she is, blaming like Scott and him for everything. Like I said, we found out why she hates him and everything. It's like, how is this all their fault? Yes, it's not their fault. Like, Beacon Hills was literally a beacon for the supernatural. Like, and once again, like, all the crap Gerard's done, all the people he's hurt, it's like, can you, once again, she doesn't know the full story about how technically everything that's ever happened in this series can be traced back to him. Because if it wasn't for Kate doing what she did, and she never would have done what she did if it wasn't for her dad being the way that he is, Peter wouldn't have done what he did, which would have led to him biting Scott and that whole, like, everything going down the way it did. So it was like, technically going to trace everything technically back to him and the Argent family. But like I said, I dived a lot into that before, so I'll just kind of move on. Gabe was the one that ended up doing it, but Nolan was kind of like shaken by it. Even in class, you saw him kind of shaking. So it's interesting that he acted so like, oh yeah, but then when the time came for it, like, he still can't cross that line. It's kind of messed up that Monroe wants to push him to cross that line and everything, but still. I mean, it's not like Gabe enjoyed it, even though they're beating on supernaturals and want to call them out. But it's like, I guess we'll call them out so someone else can go, oh, we actually have to do it. Because I think it's also because, Nolan had a situation of like, oh, I know this person. Like, he's in the same class as me or something. Which kind of brings us back to the kids from last episode. He knew one of the kids because it was someone he knew. And I think that still shook him, especially because you have Scott's dad up there asking all these questions to him, Monroe, to Gerard, because the thing is that Scott's dad is in this on his own, because he can't necessarily tell the FBI why he's really investigating all this, because he himself is just learning about the supernatural world. And it's kind of interesting when you find out, like, when he finds out, like, oh, Scott and the others aren't going, he's like, what are they up to? And Melissa's like, no, don't worry about them, let them do it, they got this, they've been handling this supernatural thing for a good couple years now, you can trust them. And it's because you can tell she's only saying that because she is just as worried as he is, because yeah, they've been tight spots before, but nothing to this extent. Not to the point that they've had literally the entire town want them dead. It's never been like things have been bad. Even during the first half of season 6A, things were bad. But man, this is like bad on a different level, because we're talking about humans who are afraid, who know the truth that something's not right in Beacon Hill, know the existence of the supernatural, so it puts it on a completely different scale. That's a supernatural problem, but humans, scary thing all on their own. Kind of jumping around, a big interesting thing was obviously the whole Theo and Liam situation, where they were kind of trying to draw the hunters to them and everything by making Nolan follow them. And I thought it was so interesting that that scuffle they kind of caused to kind of make it seem like everyone was there. Theo punching him, even at one point he's like, you do realize you ripped my shirt. He's like, well, yeah, but you punched me in the nose, you broke my nose twice, you let it heal and you broke it again. He's like, huh, and bam, hits him again. Okay, there, a third time. And it's also interesting too hearing Gerard speak, like kind of bouncing back in that about that particular situation, is that he's sending Nolan off, and then Monroe being like, he's going to get himself killed. It's like, well, if we're lucky, Gerard's like, if we're lucky, he'll take one of them down with him. And she's like, are you really okay with that? It's like, yeah, and you should be too. Which is like, I'm surprised she still doesn't have any reservations about this. Once again, I'm sure this thing like is seeping into them, because it's something that Theo kind of gets into, that this thing doesn't just amplify fear, because people can feel more than one thing at a time, especially in like Liam's case, because a big part of this is about Liam's anger getting out of control. He doesn't know why, but when he's seeing Nolan, he's super pissed off and everything, and Theo ends up and it's something I've kind of thought about before too, like all this started like at the beginning of this half of the season, where like Liam is off balance, he's getting angry. Like he comments on the fact that he never needed his mantra before this for a while, because he got his anger under control, but now it's like out of control. It's like this thing is messing with him, because the thing that Theo says is, when you're afraid, you get angry. That's just how you work. So everyone's got different emotions, whereas like maybe that's the same thing for Monroe and Gerard when they're afraid. Even though Gerard wouldn't act like he's afraid, maybe he puts on a bravado, and maybe that bravado turns into anger. You know what I'm trying to say? So everyone feels a little something more, which is amplifying their emotions and their fear, and this thing's just feeding off of it more. Even though it's not around Gerard and his people, so far, the high school seems like it might be sufficing, but obviously it's branching out, as we saw like during the last episodes at the police station and everything. It's really branching out. So, and I think it ended up, I don't know if I really commented on this last episode, but when it made those cops kill themselves, I'm sure that's because by other people seeing their bodies, it will instill dread and despair in them. And so it would like, it amplifies itself even more. It's like, oh, these actions of fear and desperation will amplify the other people's fear and desperation, So, because the thing is, in this episode, Liam was almost ready to kill Nolan if it wasn't for Theo, so, which is kind of interesting. Like, I do like what they're doing with Theo this season. Like, obviously, he's kind of always been a lone wolf. I mean, especially because of all the circumstances he caused last season. And by last season, I mean season 5, not season 6. I feel like I have to specify with that. But, all the trouble he caused in season 5, all the people he used manipulating Guild. So, but it seems like they're trying to change him around where he is being helpful, and it seems like it's so interesting too, because Liam and Theo are kind of bonding to the extent like it's like a love-hate relationship, and I'm curious, is that what they're setting this up for too? Is like, is Theo going to be around to like be a part of like, like maybe Liam will go off and start his own pack one day, and maybe Theo will be there to kind of like, help anchor him, much like Mason helps anchor him, maybe the same thing. Like, because for Scott, he's got all his friends, he's got Malia, he's got Styles, he's got Lydia, all to kind of keep him anchored, plus Liam too. And that was kind of an interesting thing too, that Gerard had brought up. He's like, yeah, the relationship between a beta and an alpha, it's like possibly even stronger than a mother and child. And it's like, oh, when I break his beta's neck and throw him in front of him, how will Scott feel? And then he's talking about, then after that, take care of Scott and the entire pack will fall. And you see this smile on Monroe's face. It's like going to the extremes that they are. Is like, I guess even Monroe's rationalizing as, this is war. We're saving the human race by doing this. So if we have to make sacrifices along the way, then so be it, But it's like, once again, it brings up that question: what is just them, and then what's this thing amplifying things within them, So what's amplified and what's just their base wants and needs with this whole situation. It also seems like Liam subconsciously chose his place because he has very emotional connection to it, because Brett and them kind of brought him out there. They brought him out there and flung balls at him because they lost the game, and he kind of like, because he wasn't good at the game, maybe he let his anger get the best of him. So maybe it's a combination of like, I mean, it reflected the current situation, because it's like, it was meant to like amplify his anger even more. So maybe this thing this shapeshifter tapped into his head that much, because everyone is being affected, and it's something Liam's bringing up. He's like, well, if it's doing this to me, what is it doing to everyone else? Which is the thing though, it's like, is it specifically targeting Liam? Like, because it feels like it's hitting Liam more than it's hitting anybody else. So, I mean, everyone else is being affected, sure, but I feel like, I mean, maybe it's just because Liam's such a special case that it's affecting him the most, because of his anger and everything and the way he operates. So, because I was wondering if that was like something the whole Brett situation with him and the other cross players hawking balls at him. I was wondering if that was just all in his head, but it's like, no, that was like a memory. Like he subconsciously picked a place that he had a tie to, and it's like, you shouldn't have done that, but maybe, like I said, this thing kind of got inside of his head. Like this whole fear thing kind of made him pick this place without, or maybe he didn't realize how much of an emotional connection he had to the place that it would trigger all that anger into him. I mean, to the point, like when he was ready to punch Nolan, he was punching the wall repeatedly just to stop himself from compensate for all that rage inside of him, to the point his hand started getting all bloody. Obviously, you had Scott and them kind of sneaking into the base, trying to destroy all the weapons, but by the time they got there, all the weapons are gone, sadly. I think more so than anything, it was probably like Scott's dad visiting early in the episode probably made them decide, like, we got to move this merchandise now. I mean, maybe he saw 2 steps ahead and knew Scott and then would come, but more so than anything, maybe combination of the two. But the place getting locked down like it did, multiple things. Malia almost had it with that getting the lock off thing, and I love that whole like them dodging the lasers and her being on top of him, and every time she kind of perks up, be like, okay, I got this, and he's like grabs her, pulls her closer. He's like, she's like, yeah, this is and he's like, uncomfortable. He's like, yeah, it's weird and awkward, and I loved it. But she almost had it with that lock, but sadly it didn't work out like that. But go Argent and Lydia kicking those like Hunter's asses there, but also major props to Lydia for like knocking that door down. That was badass. Shows you just how powerful a Banshee screaming is. Like, I feel like, because every time you never really get a good estimate. We know it's enough to pull down a human body, but enough to stop a door that will stop bullets. That's crazy impressive. So, but obviously a big thing in this episode too was like the whole Malia and Scott thing, and it, because for Malia, it's like she's never really experienced the world. She's a teenager, like this is all she's ever really known. That's why she wanted to go to France so much. And she's like, I'm not going to die like this. And finally her and Scott make out later in the episode. Obviously the episode ends off with the attack on their place. I kind of figured as much when Lydia was like, they were in the hallway, like her and Argent, and then like there was that house that she kind of like flipped back to. I was like, wasn't that Scott's house? It looked like it was. But then she kept hearing the shell casings and the bullets and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, because apparently he's armed the entire town. I mean, maybe not the entire town, but at least those on their side. Oh, side note too, like it was super sad finding out about, I mean, you kind of already figured they were dead, but the fact is I was like, oh, maybe they're still alive because, Scott's dad was still looking for him. I was like, oh, maybe they are still alive. Maybe they're being captured. Maybe they're being held somewhere. Maybe they didn't die, but I figured they did, but I was like, not unless they got knocked out. But it's like it was one couple on his own, so I was like, they weren't knocked out. The sad thing is, what's even worse is when Scott and Malia looked in there, it's like trophy cases. One is like a piece of flesh, basically where they held like their pack symbol for Satomis, the stones stacked on each other, and also ears, and it's just like transformed ears, and it's like, that sucks, dude. That's terrible. Like, no matter what, once again, it's like they're not like recognizing, even though there's something else, they are still kids. These are still human beings who are special, and it's sad, and I can't. And I mean, even the attack later on, because the point is, like, obviously Melissa is the target, because it's like what, Gerard was talking about earlier, that relationship of a beta and an alpha. It obviously doesn't apply just to werewolves. Obviously it applies to kids as well. So it's like going to the opposite spectrum for Scott. Like, attack the person Scott cares about most, his mom. Obviously, it could be his mom that got shot at the end, because we see a pool of blood, but I don't think it's his mom. Most likely it's Argent. Just because it's like, Argent would do whatever he could to protect Melissa, even if it was a stray bullet. So I'm thinking it's him that got struck. So mainly where my mind goes. I think they did it obviously to make you think it was Melissa. It might just be, but more so than anything, my mind's immediately go, oh, that would suck. I was like the fact is they lifted a hand made me kind of go like, okay, whoever it is, they want them to survive. So it's probably going to put them in critical condition, because that was a shit ton of blood. So I'm thinking it was Argent. So Melissa's probably going to try and work hard to kind of keep him alive and everything. So, but once again, kind of bringing that, like I said, that conversation of like, you have your problem with supernaturals, I get it. But Monroe, can you really say you're 100% okay attacking someone like Melissa, a freaking nurse who lives to help people? What are you doing? Like, is it a situation of like, well, she's guilty by association because her son's a monster? And it's like, what kind of rationale is that? Are you, I want, like, it, I want to know where your rationale is in that. Like, oh, because she has to die by association, or just because you're so focused on taking Scott down. Once again, it's like her personal vendetta against them for everything that happened between her and the Beast. It's like, that's not their fault. It was a impactful time where they, like, once again, Scott did everything he could to protect the school. Like, he was getting ripped to shreds by the Beast, especially when he was in the library and he stood up to fight that thing by himself, and you're going to call him out for it. Like, every bad thing that's ever come to Beacon Hills, he's protected everyone there to the best of his ability. And it's like I said, it's a combination of the fact is that I think that there's a minuscule amount of them that think like that already, but this whole shifter thing, it's amplifying it even more. So, and what makes this whole situation even crazier is because Gerard's not going to stop with Beacon Hills, because the map, it seems like they're all nematodes that are spread across the world, like the one that's in Beacon Hills. It's like, oh, because it's the one in Beacon Hills drew in supernaturals, they will all draw in supernaturals into traps, because this is a mass worldwide supernatural genocide. It's not just here in Beacon Hills. He plans to go global with this genocide, and it's like, holy crap. Like, we always knew Gerard was kind of out there before, but to this extent, it's crazy to think about. That plan out there, obviously, someone being hurt, like I said, my money's on Argent. People in town armed with heavy artillery. The school being in the situation that it's in, like, there's no telling how this is all going to play out. Like I said, overall, very good episode, and I'm very excited to see what goes on in the next episode. And now moving on to the Twin Peaks finale. What do I have to say? I don't know. Legitimately, I have no fucking idea what to say. Legitimately, like, when I got to the end of everything, only words that could come out my mouth were, wait, what? And it's literally been a couple minutes and I still can't find the words to say, because I don't know, because a lot of that I was like, okay, I'm all on board. I see the direction you might be going. I mean, before I really even get further in this, like, just break everything down and just where my thoughts are and everything. Obviously, at the beginning, you had that whole situation where, Doppelganger Cooper shows up and everything, and I was like, holy crap. It's like the moment he's in the office with Frank, I'm like, oh my god, he's going to start killing people, isn't he? Just because Dale didn't get there in time. But luckily enough, like, the call went through and Dale warns him, but then, like, Doppelganger Cooper's about to fire his gun, but Lucy saves the day. Which, I guess this is all the visions that Andy had, and he went to go check on the lady that they got from that other world, and Freddy saved the day by which Chad snuck out because he had a key in his shoe and he got a gun, and then Freddy kind of knocked him out with the bars of that whole thing. But then it turns into, like, Doppelganger Cooper's dead, but then they start pulling out, Bob's in this spear blob and attacks them, and you have Freddy kind of saving the day. He's kind of getting a little messed up and everything, but he fights it back and punches at one point, and punches a hole to hell, I guess. I don't know. There's fire shooting up from the ground, and then all of a sudden, I don't know. And then it breaks into pieces, which made me think, oh, it's not actually dead. It's just dispersed or something, so it still exists in some form. And then you have Cooper and the lady in pink, the lady who has, like, no eyes and stuff. They touch hands and look at each other, and then her face kind of cracks open, and it's like, it's actually Diane, but with red hair. So it's like, this is the real Diane, because obviously the other Diane was a fake, which goes back to the old question that, like I brought up last time. I was like, oh, does that mean there was no Diane from the beginning, that there was always this one? It's like, no, there was a real Diane, but she's been in that other world this entire time, like over these past 20-some years. I would assume that's what that was saying. And everyone's there. I love the Mitchum brothers' response to, like, this is a story for the grandkids. And then even, like, Bobby walks in at the last second and everything. All of a sudden, he's like, what's going on here? And then one Jim Belushi plays, it's like, you took the fucking words right out of my mouth. It's like, everyone was there to see everything unfold. But then you have, like, Cooper asking Diane, do you remember everything? She's like, yes. And then you have Gordon be like, yo, what's going, like, him saying like like things are going to change. Now this is where my mind immediately takes everything, and everything's just all over the place. Basically, it seemed like what they were aiming for was to have Cooper go back in time and change everything. Stop Laura from ever being murdered, and that would in fact change everything. When he meant like some things will change, hopefully we'll meet again and stuff like that. That's where my mind was initially, because when he went back in time, he went back to the night that Laura died, because it was like her and James, like their last meeting, and then she runs off into the woods, and then Cooper's there, and she's like, oh, I remember you from the dream. And so I guess it's supposed to kind of fit the whole image of like, when she ended up in the other world after dying, like the last person she saw was Cooper, and he was touching her shoulder being like, it's all okay, the men from her dreams and everything. So he grabs her and he pulls her along. So I'm like, and then they show you like, they're like, oh, her body disappears from the beach. Pete never found her body, just went fishing and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting that they cut back to those scenes and stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I was like, okay, so we're erasing everything, so everything's about to change. But then Laura disappears, and then there's a whole scene with Cooper ending up in the place the original series ended, when he went into the Black Lodge after Wyndham Earl and Annie. So he ends up in that spot, and Diane's waiting for him, but then Diane's like, okay, things are going to change, like, we don't know what it's going to be like on the other side or whatever. So I guess like part of my brain was like, is this supposed to represent the fact is that this is like Diane kind of doing a little time traveling, that this is Diane with knowledge of everything, and she's sealed away in that form for like the next 25 years, while the fake Diane was put in place. But I was thinking the fake Diane was put in place by the doppelganger Cooper, but then maybe not. And I'm confused on that front. And they go to a motel, they have sex. He wakes up as like Richard. They're like, oh, my name's not Richard. The letter was left by a woman named Linda. Goes to like a place called Judy's, and whole thing goes down, which I appreciate that whole showdown where he ends up taking a guy's gun, kick him in the nuts, shoot one guy in the leg. Basically, shot him in the foot and threw the guy's guns in a fryer. Nevertheless, ends up going to this waitress's place, and it's Laura, and her name's actually Karen Page. So I was like, okay, so we got this whole situation of like, obviously Cooper is here, but he knows who she is as Laura Palmer, and he's like, I'm an FBI agent, but his name's Richard. He's like, but I'm Dale Cooper. He's like, you're Laura Palmer. So it's like he remembers everything, but it's like both her and him are maybe in some alternate reality or something. I was like, maybe like instead of her dying, she was pushed off into like, maybe when he was dragging her away, like something kind of swept her into another time or alternate reality, and that's where she landed. Because at the same time, like Mike or Gerard, I still don't know which one is which. I'm guessing at this point it never really mattered, but Mike had made another Dale Cooper, or rather Dougie, and this one went to Janie and Sonny Jim. So I call that a little bit. I was thinking like, okay, Cooper would come back to them, but he wouldn't be himself. Like he lost all his memories as Cooper or something and be their Dougie again. That's what I was thinking. Not unless this is their Dougie, but now he has all his memories as Dougie, but also as Cooper. I don't know which way that would fall in that regard. But then he takes Laura, or rather Carrie, and there's a dead body in her house, and takes her to Twin Peaks, where it's like, okay, here's everything. Like, oh yeah, this is where you're supposed to be, and oh, here's your family and your house. Wait, it's not your house. Wait, what's going on here? And even Cooper's confused as like, what's going on? And then like he goes to, like, because the person who opens the door isn't her mom. It's like, because he was taking her to her mom, but then it's like, wait, what's going on? And so they're waiting outside, and he's like, or what year is it? And she screams, and it goes, cuts to black, and it goes back to her whispering in his ear and ends it there. It's like, wait, what? That's my point. What? This is supposed to be the finale, and you leave it on a cliffhanger. I feel like that's just as big as the original series. It's like, what? I don't know whether there's some situation where it's like they always plan to end it like this. Was it the Showtime was like, hey, you got to wrap it up? It's like, okay. And just to give them a middle finger, Mark Frost and David Lynch were just like, there's some plans to end this in a movie? Because immediately, like I said, my brain's all over the place of thinking like, are they stuck at some like, are they in Twin Peaks before? Like everything, like the whole like, oh, we're, what year is this? So is this some, I don't know, because it was all about like finding Laura, because like you got lined up all those different messages and stuff like that. Because there's also the thing that was said by Mike that was kind of like, it was that rhyme from the original series about being caught between two worlds, fire walk with me, a magician trying to find a way out, which I would assume the magician's supposed to be Cooper in that sense. So maybe he's caught between two worlds or two realms, and maybe that other Cooper is supposed to represent him. But like I said, there's so much that's still left unanswered. Like I heard someone talk about the fact is that like, oh yeah, that things kind of got wrapped up. It's like, there's so much left unsaid. It's like, what the hell happened to Richard? What about Audrey and her whole situation? Because you saw that little flash at the end of the episode we saw her. It's like, what is that all about? What's this whole situation with Billy? And then I start thinking, is the drunk guy in the jail cell supposed to be Billy? Because Billy was bleeding from his face and stuff like that. That dude in the cell was only bleeding from his mouth. Just so many questions. I'm like, legitimately, what the fuck, dude? I don't know. Like, at least, like, the original series had an ending. I don't know. I feel like it was more digestible than this. Like, I feel like there's so many loose ends, and I don't know. I legitimately don't know how to feel. Like I said, I don't know whether they had plans to make some like movie tie-in or something. Because I remember hearing that Showtime was always a little pissed because David Lynch was like, "Oh yeah, let's take this really slow." So I don't know if this was always the plan. Like, is that ending? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more to this ending that I'm not getting, but I feel like it's not like a closure ending of like, oh, this is where everything is. Da, 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 da. Like, you got little bits here and there, the Ed and Norma situation. And I don't know, like, I feel like there's so much left unsaid, and it blows my mind that, like, it ended that way, that this is supposed to be like a series finale, that this is supposed to be the finale, no more Twin Peaks after this. Like I said, not unless they have plans of making some more. Like, that's the only way I can interpret that they went farther back in time in Twin Peaks than they were supposed to, and not unless they were like, yeah, we thought we were going to give Twin Peaks a happy ending. It's like, no, we're going to leave it ambiguous and confusing. It's like, yep. It's like, I don't know what that's all about, because you didn't get happy endings with a lot of like finding out, because there's always like, oh, hopefully we'll meet again, and once again he says some things would change, and I was expecting like lives to be different, like because Laura Neville got murdered, all this different, like like some domino effects of like all the dominoes that went falling down because of Laura's death, but it's just like they didn't do that. If they did probably, but it's like we never got to see it or experience it. Because there's even a moment where Diane looks out the window and she sees another Diane, and I'm like, what is that supposed to be? Is that another thread you're setting up? And like I said, there's so much I'm confused about. Like, whatever happened to Freddy and them? It's like, Freddy, this was his destiny. So that's what this whole glow thing was about. But he beat Bob, but is Bob dead, or did Bob just like turn into more pieces, and did he just go somewhere? And what about this entity known as Jowdy, which they called Judy, because it was something Gordon, Jeffries, and Cooper all knew about, but kind of kept from Albert. That basically this is like some ultimate evil entity, and everyone that was kind of getting close to this thing just kind of up and disappeared. So I don't know whether this whole situation is supposed to be connected to that, because the restaurant Cooper went to find Laura was called Judy's, and so I'm thinking, like, is it supposed to be like some kind of purgatory type of situation? Legitimately, I don't know. That's why I don't know how I feel about it. I was so on board with everything being like, oh, we're trying to rewrite history, and then things took that turn, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, I feel like this is kind of like got to be some kind of weird joke or something like that. To the point I'm going to I want to rewatch everything just to make sure there wasn't more to the episode that I just didn't see. Like, oh yeah, actually we aired a third episode instead of just being 2 parts. There's actually 3 parts that just nobody knew about. It's like, what? It's got to be something crazy like that. There's no way this is like the final episode. There's got to be more to it than this. There's got to be like some like, I don't know. Because it's not like they didn't have the time. Because I was counting it. I was like, okay, wait, this is weird. It's like they haven't even gotten to Twin Peaks yet. I'm like, and there's like, almost 15 minutes left in the episode? You must be wrapping this up. No, nothing. And there's also that thing with Sarah too that we saw. What was it, like last episode or episode before last, when she was in the bar and she ripped off her face and bit that dude's neck? We're not going to talk about that. And then there was the whole her smashing Laura's picture. Like, is that supposed to all represent something? I don't know. There's so much I feel like is open to interpretation with this. So legitimately, I don't know what else to say. Like, I can't, like, oh, like this and like, there's nothing else to talk about. Because that legitimately left me dumbfounded. And this ain't even me doing I'm not even talking about it to the same extent I would talk about different TV shows and episodes. I'm like, oh, this and I've done all I can. I will legitimately have to end this here. Like, it's a lot shorter than I want it to be, but I've got to check something else. Like, hopefully I'll end up finding something out and I can tack something on at the end when I'm done editing this. But for now, this is all there is to it. I'm sorry, it's not that good, but it's just like, you're getting my raw emotions from the situation. You know, it's not like, oh, I've had a day or so to kind of sit through it and process it. It's like, nah, I've had a few minutes to sit there and process it before I started recording this. So I don't know. I'm almost scared to see what anyone else has to say about the situation. Like, dude, holy shit. Nevertheless, I mean, that's all I wanted to talk about this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.